I love The Fighting Man. I can't tell you where this love came from, but it's been there for a while. Now, what does that have to do with the sort of content I usually release on this channel? Well, I released a video over a month ago that examined the connection between turn the other cheek, found in Matthew chapter 5, and by a sword, found in Luke 22. Needless to say, people had varying and, at times, colorful opinions. Some even went so far as to assert that I am not a follower of Christ because of my perspective. Now, I'm perfectly willing to say I could be wrong in my interpretations of these passages, or any passage for that matter, but I think I've put forward a compelling argument that supports my position. So what does this have to do with soldiers? I recently watched 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. This movie is nearly 10 years old, and the events it depicts happened 13 years ago. Frankly, I missed all of this. I used to be someone who couldn't care less about the world, let alone the people in the world. So these types of stories sort of drifted past with virtually no recognition. However, in time, I've become aware of the events in Benghazi. I've listened to the testimonies of Kris Paronto and John Tiegen, and I finally watched the movie that showed their story. And yeah, I know, it's a Michael Bay film, and it shows, but it nevertheless is telling the narrative of a true event that involved real men who put their lives on the line to defend the people under their charge. What's struck me about some of these men and several others who chose a similar profession is that many of them are professing Christians. This includes the two operators I mentioned earlier, but apparently also Dave Benton and Jack Silva, both of whom fought in Benghazi. As I've gone on to listen to the stories of various soldiers, the names of Sean Ryan, Jocko Willink, Matt Bissonette, and many others have been added to the list of martial Christians. What I see when I think of these men and the comments that suggest that I am not a Christian because I believe there is a biblical directive for the believer to defend their lives when they are in danger for their faith is a strange disconnect. See, I don't believe any Christian, regardless of where they stand on any theological topic, would ever approach these men and tell them to their faces that they are not themselves Christians, or at the very least that they've acted outside of God's will to fulfill their duties when serving. I just don't see that happening. I dare say these men would be, and likely have been, applauded amongst Christians for their heroism, which would seem to suggest that it's okay to perform violent actions simply because one's vocation calls for it, but it isn't okay when one's life is literally being threatened due to their faith. And that's the disconnect. Intuitively, I think we all sense that defending one's life and the lives of others is necessary and permissible. Never mind that I assert that Christ commands his followers to defend themselves should their lives be threatened for their faith in Luke 22. So no, this message isn't really about movies or Benghazi or special operators. It's about consistency. It's about whether we actually believe that defending innocent life, including our own, when it's threatened because of Christ, is compatible with following Christ. We instinctively honor the fighting man who lays down his life for others. We applaud courage, sacrifice, and violent restraint in the service of protection. Yet, somehow, when that same instinct is applied to the believer whose life is on the line because of faith, we call it compromise instead of courage. That's the tension I can't ignore. I'm not claiming to settle the debate. I'm simply arguing that the Christian conscience already knows the answer because we cheer it every time a protector stands between evil and the innocent. And if that's true on foreign soil, then we need to at least wrestle honestly with the idea that a Christian might one day have to do the same when the threat is standing right in front of them. Not for nation, not for politics, but for faith. That's why I made this video. Not to glorify violence, not to win an argument, but to call us to think clearly, biblically, and consistently about courage, sacrifice, and what faithful obedience might actually cost when the stakes are real. Thank you for watching. God bless, and be excellent to each other.